welcome to Alive in Writing, a podcast on troubleshooting life as a writer.
I'm Shatona Having.
I'm April Heyman.
And I'm C.R. Rowanson. We're here.
We're alive.
And we're writing. And today we are talking about the thing that none of us ever do, of course.
Never.
Self-criticism.
What is that?
What is this self-criticism thing? I know I've never done that, and I'm sure April has never done that.
No.
Surely at least one of us looked up the Wikipedia page, right?
Because that's such a reliable source. Great idea, Clark.
And I did, and unfortunately, all three of our photos are on the page.
Oh, no. I tried to hide it.
Also with self-denial.
That too.
That's it.
That was one in the footnotes.
Yes.
All right, so we're avoiding actually talking about criticizing ourselves because we all think we're awesome.
And right, sure.
Right,
yeah,
guys?
That.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. I always wanted to be the popular kid, but since I was homeschooled, I was the popular kid.
Exactly. It's easy when there's just one of you anyway.
Right? Yeah, because I was an only kid, too, at that point.
Bringing it back around, did you have something specific you wanted to talk about with self-criticism, Shatona?
I really wanted to address April's self-criticism issues because I'm practicing to be a therapist in one of my books, and so...
Why talk about your own problems when you can talk about someone else's?
Amen!
That speck in your brother's eye and removing the log in yours does not apply in this case, right, Shanona?
No, not at all. I don't have a log. Where's that log? Did the lights go out?
So this is something that every writer, like every single writer, deals with. At least that's what I'm told. I know I deal with it, and I think we're going to hear April tell us a little bit about it, which... Is it for Spilled Ink?
Yes, it's for Spilled Ink.
Yay, Spilled Ink.
Yay,
It's
Spilled
a
Ink.
great book. Just ignore what she says about it because it's really actually a great book.
So Spilled Ink is it has its moments. And this is what they're talking about, self-criticism.
Just start with the pitch.
Okay, so Riiitt moves back home to Mississippi and inherits her uncle's estate, a mysterious inkwell, and a murderer. And that's like my 30-second elevator speech. Actually, I think it's shorter than that.
Yeah, 15.
Awesome. So the problem is that as I'm writing, all I can think of is, boy, this is such tripe. People have done this before. My characters aren't rounded. Nobody's gonna believe this. I mean, I really could go on. And
she has.
And I have. Poor Shatona and
Sitting
Clark.
across from her at Denny's, she's going on and on about how horrible this book is, and I read the scene and I'm like, this is great. What are you talking about?
It's time to come clean. I mean, we deal with that too. I know I have that little voice in the back of my head. I'll just be writing, and just little tiny voice in the back going, "You suck."
Yeah, because we don't have our own internal peanut galleries doing the same thing to us.
Oh, no. Mine just says, you might want to revise that.
A lot.
Every last word of that. Maybe trash it and try again.
It's not funny enough.
So you guys both seem so confident most of the time. Are you sure that absolutely everybody deals with this problem?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I actually am. I have never heard, even the most arrogant people I know, the most arrogant writers I've ever met, they've even said the same thing. I've heard Stephen King talk about the junk that he has written.
Right.
Okay, we're talking the horror master himself, and he talks about the junk. He's like supposed to have the most clean copy that goes to his editors of anyone in the business, and he talks about the junk that he writes. So he's a self-critic too.
So how did you deal with this with Spilled Ink?
Oh.
I yelled at her.
Actually haven't dealt with it.
Ignoring the manuscript.
I've been ignoring. No, I can't ignore the manuscript. No, what happens is I give it to Shatona, and she tells me how wonderful I am. And some days when she's not available, some days I just push through and just write and say to myself, I can always go back and rewrite it. Those are really hard writing days when the self-critic comes out and makes herself known. So really just have to push through, because if I didn't push through, the books wouldn't get written. I would stop and I would never write again. And I have too many stories not to tell, so I have to push through.
Absolutely.
Which really sucks some days.
Change your mindset on those days, in my opinion.
Right.
For me, when I get to this point where I start reading this going, what is the point of this? Why did I did that last night, actually. It's like, why did I write this? Who cares about this scene? This is stupid. The reader's going to be bored. And all of a sudden I just shut up. I'm like, no, okay, this is just a very, very, very detailed outline. And I've got to get all that information down so that tomorrow I can reread it and do it. And half the time the next morning when I wake up and I reread that section, I'm like, this is good. I like this. This is great. Half the time there was nothing wrong with it. My brain was just either tired, or I needed something sugary, or I needed some sleep, or I needed someone to just come over and take my mind out of it for a minute, because you get tunnel vision. You just get caught in there. And then sometimes, like with New Year's Revolutions, I would come back the next day and I would read it and I'd go, yeah, this is a great scene, but man, it needs to be funnier. And so I'd go in and I would change this word here and I'd change that line there. And by the time I'm done, I'm chuckling and cackling, and the people are looking at me really weird at Denny's. But you know what? Hey, deal with it, people.
That's actually why I flip back and forth between really loving and really hating editing. Because I'll sit there and those voices are going saying, this is horrible, this is bad, this is the worst thing anybody's ever written. And then I'll get little glimmers where it's like, that was pretty good. Or the really satisfying thing for me is when I fix it and I see how to make it better. I really, really like those moments. I actually, real quick, we've been wandering all over the place. Something you'll see a lot when you're talking about criticism with people is some people wear it as a badge of pride, saying I'm a perfectionist.
Yeah.
So are there times where this criticism is useful? I know it's helped me, but how do we delineate when it's being helpful and striving us to be better, and when it's holding us back? Do you guys have any guidance on that?
Yeah, when it stops you from writing, period. That, to me, would be you're listening to your inner critic a little too much.
Let's face it, sometimes you're right about your writing. Okay?
Yeah.
I mean, every word that April has ever written is not pure genius, okay?
It could be, though.
But that's
You don't know.
You know what? That's a lie from the pit. Everything can always be improved. I've never read a book, never, not one I've written, not one I've read by anyone else, that I didn't go, that sentence, what were they not thinking? That's a horrible sentence. Movies. Have you seen movies where, like, there's this line and you're going, really?
And it yanks you right out of the story because you're like,
how about
what?
The last line of Pretty Woman. He rescues him right back. Yeah, really? That's your ending line?
Or I'm going to go straight to Rogue One. Loved that movie, except for the part where Vader was on the bridge and turns and gives the really painfully cheesy line of "Don't choke on your aspirations."
Oh my!
Oh, it was painful.
I haven't seen it.
Painful.
I haven't either, and oh my goodness, ugh.
So, obviously, this can be a good and bad thing. Do you guys have a way to make sure you just keep it as a good thing? I don't really. So, if you have thoughts,
I think it boils down to keeping focused on what your real goal is. This presumed failure of yours. Okay, so you've got it. Great. Now, what are you going to do about it? Is your goal to just wallow in self-pity? Is your goal to finish this book?
Right.
I mean, you've got a goal. What do you need to do to get to that goal? Do you need to fix it right now? Is it essential that right now this be fixed exactly so that it's print ready? Or can you go on to the next one so that you can look at it later? You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, so if anyone has ever read Anne Lamott, she has a saying, and it's got a swear word in it, but it's yeah, I know, I won't say it.
Thank you.
Because it's kind of a clean podcast.
is it? My bad.
So it's basically your first draft is awful. It just is. It's the first pouring out of all that story onto the page. That's why we have an editing process. So the self-critic is fabulous when you're editing, but you're not editing while you're writing. You shouldn't be anyway. Mm-hmm. I have a really bad, that is my worst habit. So I will edit as I write, and I'm not supposed to.
So you just kind of gave me a thought. I think a good way to word that, which hopefully will help me in the future, is whenever you're writing a first draft, just remember that draft is the worst the story will ever be.
Right.
Ooh,
Oh, that's a
will-
good one.
genius.
It
Yeah.
will only get better from there. I'm proud of myself.
Write that down, people.
Write that
That's
down.
awesome.
I can go
Put it
home
on
now,
a
right?
T-shirt.
So it's time for our spotlight.
Okay, yeah, so this is me again. What I wanted to talk about, there's another podcast that I really like listening to, and it's called Ditch Diggers. It's with Mur Lafferty and Matt F.M. Wallace. I'll double check. They'll be in the liner notes. And the concept of Ditch Diggers is writing is tough. There are days where it's horrible, it's hard work, it's grimy, but you're a professional writer and you got to get out and dig that ditch. Just a warning for you guys, since apparently this is a clean podcast. Theirs is not. They like to swear up and down completely unashamedly. I love it. It's massively entertaining to me.
So don't give it to my kid. Got it.
Yes, that is important.
Okay.
So, I don't know, have either of you actually listened to Ditch Diggers?
Yes.
I have not.
Some?
I have, yeah.
Well, that's just what they talk about a lot. They talk about the business of writing, and a lot of times they will discuss just how flippin' hard things can
Good
be.
job there, Clark.
But you just got to get out and dig that ditch despite what the inner critic is doing.
Right.
Yeah, and that's really true. So how do you decide what's true about your writing and the negative side, and just work on that? How do you decide that, okay, so my critic is right, my critic isn't, it's not lying to me this time, and I'm going to save myself a lot of time if I fix this problem? How do you decide when it's true and when it's just garbage?
Oh, so you're saying that sometimes the heckler is sort of an instinct telling you something's wrong?
Right. Sometimes,
That's what you mean?
I think
Okay, yeah, I
think
get
sometimes
that.
it's true.
Right. So the heckler, is that the person who is the book is meant for, or is that the actual sitting back and he's actually editing? So you have to think through it. Is this something, am I looking at this through a reader's eyes, or am I looking at it through my editing eyes? And
Good point. What's your reader going to think?
what's my reader going to think? And my problem is I disguise my inner editor as my potential reader. And because what I'll say is like, oh man, this is so boring. What are they going to think? They're going to put it down. My readers aren't going to read this. And that's not true, because my inner editor is seeing something maybe.
So he puts on the fan shirt to blend in with the crowd?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
So he's a fraud.
Exactly. But the problem is maybe it's my subconscious picking up on something is really wrong with the chapter. I just don't know what it is. And so I default to this whole, oh, this is such a bad story, or boy, that writing was awful.
So what I have to do, and it's not easy, none of these things are ever easy. Why can't they just be easy for once?
Because then everybody would do it.
I suppose. But what I have to try and do is, like April said before, it's only a problem if it actually stops me from writing. Even if I spend the entire time swearing at myself about how horrible everything is, I still got words on the page.
Right.
And
That's true.
I have time to think about it, and sometimes the source of what's bothering me will eventually become clear. I've been working on outlining my next book. The title right now, no, it's not Godslayers, that's the series that's been changed, is The Whispering Dark. But I outlined the entire thing, and I didn't like it. There was something wrong with the entire middle, and that's when I realized I was missing an entire character arc.
Can I point out that Clark actually sat down with us and we helped with it during a brainstorming session? We have an episode about You're Not Alone.
Yes.
Yeah, it's actually our first episode in this
Right.
chapter.
And it goes over some of the things that that you may find a little helpful here, like brainstorming sessions and writing in a group, and knowing that you really aren't alone when you write.
Yeah, well, in
And you're
April's...
not the only procrastinator. You're not the only
Self-critic,
you're
right.
Not the only. You're not alone. We're all self-critics, even if we want to pretend like we're not.
And April said something to that effect earlier. She said she hands her story to Shatona.
Yes, exactly.
I do the same thing. When I'm having a really bad time, I try and go out of my way to schedule a writing session with these two ladies, because then if I say anything untoward about myself, They just get all over my case and won't have anything of it. And,
It's the mom thing.
It is the mom thing.
well, sometimes I need extra help browbeating that critic into submission, you know?
Right? Yeah, yeah.
Right. And actually, when we go into the sessions, Shatona and I look at it, it's like, it's not that bad. It could be better.
Of course it could.
Everything could always be better, right?
Everything could be better.
Always.
I'm sorry. There's nothing that can't be better.
But the problem arises when your critic shows up and it stops you, or it makes you go on a totally different track than where you had intended to go, and the track is the wrong one. Right.
So sometimes you need cheerleaders to help get you through that. That's kind of
You do, yeah.
what Shatona and April do sometimes.
Ross, let's move on.
Yeah.
Wrong kind.
And actually, Writing Excuses is another podcast I really like to listen to, and they've talked a number of times about dealing with this type of problem, and I think it's really helpful. Mm-hmm. So something else I'd like to point out, we talked about this more, and the fact that you're not alone, but I feel like especially as writers, we're taught that we're supposed to sit in our little box and do our job. And
Butt in the seat.
yeah, and that's not helpful. We're taught to just hide our pains and deal with them by ourselves, and you don't have to.
No, you don't.
You really shouldn't. I think
it's bad too.
Oh yeah.
I think it totally destroys your writing.
You need
and it actually feeds the self-critic, by the way.
It does.
Absolutely.
Yes. When you've got someone else coming in saying, hey, I really like that line. That's a great line. That self-critic just shrivels a little. It's kind of like that stupid Veggie Tale with the weed and the lie, and the more you lie, the bigger it grows.
Oh, right, yeah.
It's so stupid, but it is.
It gets
kind
the
of
point
like that.
across.
It does get the point across. I mean, the more you feed it, the greater it grows. The less you feed it, it shrinks.
So her writing critic, as I'm hearing this, survives on the souls of your dead stories.
Exactly.
Don't feed it.
Don't feed it.
Don't feed it.
Or
It's a vampire.
bad
It's
scenes.
a story vampire.
It's a story. Oh, that's interesting. I haven't. Oh, that's such a good idea. I could totally turn that into a story.
Trademarked.
All right, that's mine.
So-
I tag it.
What I was trying to get at with this is there's nothing wrong with going and getting help. Now,
There's everything right with going and getting help.
you really should. And what the kind of help you need is really going to depend on where you're at and what problems you're dealing with.
Right.
I've slowly been coming to admit that I may actually have an anxiety disorder. So I need to be looking for some more professional help with a therapist. But you don't have to go to a therapist. You can go to other writers. You can go to friends. You can talk to your dog. He'll always listen.
Dogs always listen. Cats, not so much.
And they care. Dogs care. Cats, yeah. Where's my
Dogs
food?
care so very much.
Except that your dog doesn't like me.
He does once you're sitting and behaved.
Yeah.
And you don't move too much.
He's just very protective.
And you know what? We're here. On
Yes,
this podcast.
that's true.
We're here to listen. We're here to say, you need to keep writing. We're here. There's a comment box. There's an email link.
Oh, absolutely. Let us know.
We're here. I mean, we've been there. We've done that. We're going to keep doing it no matter how much we want to pretend like we're not.
So this is a side story. I get really sappy and kind of driven about stuff. But I knew for a long time that I was supposed to do a blog, and I really didn't want to. I had stuff to talk about, but I didn't feel really driven until I hit on the realization that it's not about me. It's all about helping everybody else out there. Mm-hmm. So when April came up with the idea for this podcast and we started exploring it, I really wanted to dive into how we can help you guys, which is, again, why we're talking about the whole You're Not Alone thing. So please let us know if you're dealing with something, and we'll do whatever we can to help you.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And with that, we're going to wrap it up for today.
Okay, so this has been Alive and Writing. Sometimes that's all you've got, but it's really all you need. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.